Yo, what's good? It's your man 100 Grand Ross with The Rock Never Stops. The Toronto Raptors are at an impasse, and I want to dive into that in today's video. Look, teams come to an impasse, and there's a lot of teams that are at an impasse after this season. But one of the specific things that really brings a team to this point is when their projected outlook has not gone according to plan, but they're already invested down a certain course of action. And a team then has to reassess and say, do we continue or do we pivot and try to do something else? Over the past 4 to 5 years, Masai Ujiri has built this Toronto Raptors team, stemming from their championship season when they beat the Golden State Warriors in the finals. And he basically said, I'm doubling down on this roster, even without Kawhi Leonard, that we can still be successful and potentially build a champion. Now, we all know what happened later on. You had the bubble, we had COVID, and then we had a whole bunch of losing that took place in the injury-riddled season, and they ended up with Scotty Barnes. And there was this new kind of beacon of light that they had a talent that they could potentially build around for the future and the present with this veteran roster. But something did not fit. And obviously we see today that that was the head coach, Nick Nurse. And I think I've said this before in previous videos that Nick Nurse has been an issue. This was a talented team. They have a defensive player of the year level talent in OG Anunoby. They had an all-star point guard in Fred VanVleet. They have an all-NBA caliber forward in Pascal Siakam. And somehow they were still barely treading water. And a lot of this was due to Nick Nurse's inability to utilize the full depth of talent that was on this roster, to continue to develop the young players that Masai Ujiri brought in, and to maximize the different skill sets that were available to him. Now he's gone, and this team has to figure out what they want to do in the future. Now, the first direction that I could see potentially happening is sticking with this roster. Yes, you're going to have to re-sign Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet, but both of them had an underwhelming season. And as a result, I don't think either of them would be commanding the amount of money that they may have commanded just last offseason. Now you also bring in Jakob, who had a revitalized season with the Toronto Raptors, who's back in with his best friend Pascal Siakam and just fit in immediately, making a tremendous impact. And what I see is a team that still has the ability to press for an NBA championship. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be one of the top teams in the East, but this is definitely, I should take that back. They can be a top team in the East. They can definitely be a top 4 or 5 seed. I think they can easily perform at the same level of the New York Knicks. Now, one of the things that the Knicks had to find is just getting the right roster around their coach, right? They thought they had the roster for the coach and it didn't work out. And so they've got to find the coach. But if they can find a coach who can maximize the different offensive skill sets that are available to him and continue to play these young guys, I think they can turn a similar corner and end up in that 4 or 5 seed. Now, of course, the Cleveland Cavaliers are still going to be there. All right, the New York Knicks are still going to be there, and it's going to be an incredibly competitive Eastern Conference. But one thing I always caution people against is this idea of blowing up teams. Blowing up a team is probably the worst thing you could ever do. First of all, you have to remember the history of the Toronto Raptors. They don't attract free agents, which means that if you blow up your team, it's going to be hard to rebuild and likely a lengthy one. Now, despite having Scotty Barnes and somebody to build around like a OG Anunoby as well, who's also another young guy, and I wouldn't even be mad at bringing back Gary Trent Jr., who's only 24 years old. But it's to say, rebuilding doesn't guarantee you that you're going to be competitive again, right? There are teams who have been rebuilding for a while now and still barely scraping, trying to get into the playoffs or even the play-in. So you don't know how long that road is going to be. But there is the other path. And it's not quite a blow-up, but it's pivoting and maybe moving away from the veterans that you currently have and bringing in a younger roster. And this is where I think the Portland Trail Blazers become a very interesting team. Because being able to have an asset like a Pascal Siakam, all-NBA level talent, who the Portland Trail Blazers have been itching for years, probably throughout the duration of Damian Lillard's career, ever since LaMarcus Aldridge left, have been looking for a talent to pair him with, to give him an opportunity to actually win a championship. And considering Pascal Siakam is relatively healthy and plays in a complementary kind of fashion to a Damian Lillard, being able to play that forward position, inside out, great slasher, gets out in transition, and is definitely a level-headed player who's, great with team, chemistry, leadership. He's been in that role. I think he's somebody who can step in immediately and provide a lot of lift for that roster. But for the Toronto Raptors, it's who they're getting back. And this is where it gets interesting. Anthony Simons and Shaedon Sharpe are two incredible assets to get back for Pascal Siakam. If they can get those two guys back, one, Shaedon Sharpe is a Toronto native, right? Oh, I'm sorry, he's a Canada native, right? He's got incredible talent. You saw at the end of the season putting up amazing numbers and is extremely exciting, probably the most athletic and talented player they've had since Vince Carter and Tracy McGrady donned their jerseys, right? And so he's definitely going to bring excitement and scoring, and he plays on both ends. And he has an NBA-ready body, which means that his developmental curve, I think, is going to be a lot quicker than some other rookies who still have to get stronger before they can really begin to impose their talent, right? He might have an Anthony Edwards type of trajectory. And then you have Anthony Simons, who's another shoot first, score first point guard, but incredibly talented. His ability to get to the rim at his size, his age. He's a very athletic, very smooth athlete who does have the ability to play make a little bit. But the beautiful part about that is his lack of facilitating is offset by Scotty Barnes' incredible talent when it comes to facilitating and being able to run the show. And I think that they could kind of form almost a Draymond Green, Stephen Curry type of tandem where they can begin to kind of run kind of handoff actions, down screens, pin downs, bringing him off of screens, right? Taking him off the ball so he doesn't have to run the show and can really just focus on scoring. There's a lot of potential there. But this is the crossroads. Now, you can always throw in a third option where, Portland and Toronto, maybe they just try to trade for Damian Lillard. But I don't think Dame wants to leave. And it's probably not going to be to want to go to a place like Toronto, right? Especially considering the underwhelming season that they just had. But as always, I want to know what you all think. Holler at me in the comments section. Which option do you like? Doubling down on the current veteran roster or going after some young guys and shifting towards the future? Holler at me in the comment section. I'll get at y'all next time. Peace.